It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Jessica Williams, an environment and climate risk research analyst, to come and share her thoughts with us. You're welcome, Ms. Williams.
Thanks. Okay. Sure. I'm going to be running through some of the work that we at S&P Global have been doing recently, and I'm actually going to skip through those slides and return to them later in session 9. And here I'm going to give you a little bit of background on some of our recent initiatives. So you'll have heard of us most likely as being a data provider, specifically credit ratings. But now we're kind of branching out and developing further products that can apply to kind of environmental risk and benefit. That's kind of a complement to our existing kind of range of products that we produce. So specifically, this relates to point 8 of the briefing of this session, and that was improving information and assessment to support decision making. So this is a product that can be used by investors that tries to convey some kind of relative assessment of adaptation benefit or mitigation benefit to kind of help that investment decision making. Okay, so we call it the green evaluation. A lot of you might have heard of it in the context of the green bond market, which is where it's been used so far. But we actually have the view and the ambition to use it more widely than that, because the green bond market is tiny in comparison to fixed income, and even fixed income is tiny compared to what we need to be investing long term to kind of work on these challenges that climate change poses. And for that reason, this assessment is designed to actually be able to apply to all sorts of financial instruments, not just green bonds. So we can use it for equity, we can use it for non-labeled green bonds. It just gives a relative assessment of the impact of projects. So, yeah. And we will run through it in a second. So this has been in development for about a year now. It was launched in April, and so far we've produced 8 public reports and assessments of this, and there are another kind of 20 behind the scenes that aren't public yet. So in essence, it's a relative ranking compared to other like projects to give you an idea of the relative quality of your investment in terms of impact. So if you take $100 million and you want to know where you're going to invest it, and your aim is impact, then we hope that you could use this assessment and see relatively which instruments you would want to be investing in to achieve the most benefit. And that could either be in terms of mitigation or adaptation. We've got 2 separate methodologies. So we use a scale at the moment. It goes from E1, which is the best, to E4. And to complement that, we've got a range of kind of, you see the breakdown of the scores in these reports as well. So here we go. And this is the timeline of kind of S&P becoming interested and developing environmental and climate risk assessment and benefit assessment products. So in May 2016, we signed the PRI's letter that was aimed at kind of enhancing ESG in credit rating agencies. Then we started to develop this product, and we published our first proposal in September last year. We then went on to acquire TrueCost, and that really kind of shows the commitment that S&P has to these kind of risks and understanding this, because they're an environmental data specialist. So they've helped us a lot in the development, and they're kind of our internal experts really on this kind of subject matter now. And it's been very beneficial for the organisation. And then we produced another updated proposal and went on to release the evaluation in April, as I mentioned. Here's some of the feedback we've received. So it's been well received in the market because it goes beyond kind of looking at the just the transaction structure. We do that, we know it's important, so we do that as well, but we also wanted to go that step further and actually look at the impact of what these projects are doing in terms of climate resilience and also mitigation. So it's kind of trying to go beyond the process and actually look at the impact. So here are some of the motives behind it. We're trying to enable institutional investors to see the kind of the impact and the quality of projects and investments in terms of in terms of quality and in a relative way. So in a way that you'd look at a credit rating and you'd see that a AAA would probably, is definitely safer than a triple B minus or something like that. You could look at this product and see the relative likely impact from what you're investing in. And you can think, well, E1 is going to be better than E2 or E3. So it's a new kind of area of data that we're trying to provide to investors. And on the mitigation side, we use very local specific conditions. So we've got a lot of underlying data that can kind of estimate the impacts of projects pre-issuance. So these projects don't have to be built, which is another beneficial element of the tool. You can kind of use it before financing to give an estimate of the likely impact of the project long term. And we use the whole life cycle. So it's construction and end of life, the full thing. We also use a hierarchy to kind of make sure we capture everything and look at sectors with a view of the 2-degree end goal as well. So this is the methodology. You'll see we've got the traditional governance, transparency valuations there because we do view them as important. But the main focus of this part is either the mitigation or the adaptation. So the final score is made up of always the transparency and the governance scores, and then either the mitigation or the adaptation. Because we went out to public consultation and we asked the market if they wanted a 1 overall score with mitigation and adaptation combined. And the conclusive answer was, no, we don't. We want mitigation and adaptation to be kept separate because they're assessing two different things. And we're completely happy with that because we have very distinct methodologies for looking at each. So if it's a mitigation project, you'd get transparency, governance, mitigation, and that would be formed into a final E score. And if we're looking at an adaptation project, we look at transparency, governance, and adaptation, and that's combined into the R score. And the weightings of these categories, as we've designed it, are 15% for transparency, 25% for governance, and then 60% for adaptation. And this kind of explains the different methodologies as well. And we'll go into more detail on the adaptation one in particular. Okay. And here's the hierarchy. So this is designed with the 2-degree Paris goal in mind to kind of differentiate between the long-term impact that different sectors can achieve. We've also done that with the water side of the tool, water projects, broken things out into their kind of long-term overall impacts. And here are some examples of public evaluations that we've done to date. So this was a green bond from the city of Gothenburg. We were able to evaluate different projects, and it was a mitigation bond. So you'll see the mitigation score here, 69, governance, transparency, and that gives a clear overall score of E2, which investors can look at and then use. And it's worth mentioning that this is completely and totally separate from the credit rating. So it's a completely different part of the analysis. So investors can look at both the credit rating of an instrument and also this kind of green rating as well. And here's Three Gorges. So the Three Gorges company were buying some projects in Portugal and Germany, some wind assets. So we were able to look at that and assess it, and it came up with an E1 score of 83. And this applies just to the instrument. So this was just the bond financing the acquisition of these projects. It doesn't look at the corporate. So we didn't look at any of the Three Gorges traditional assets because it's just the financing that we're looking at here. Brookfield, it's a US issuer, another recent publication. DC Water, so this is using the water part of our tool. They were constructing some wastewater processing facilities. Mexico City Airport, and they were financing the terminal build-out of Mexico City. They were installing some renewable energy projects. They were also producing and constructing a very efficient building for the terminal. So that's what this evaluation looked at, and it came out with the overall score of E1. And this is more information on the actual numbers the breakdown of the scores, and that's provided as well with the final report. So this is the resilience part, and this was developed by our insurance analysts. It was based a lot on their work with catastrophe bonds, so they're very used to kind of assessing and analysing catastrophe bonds, and that's where this methodology was kind of born out of. So the resilience benefit, as it's termed, is the estimated reductions in the expected damages that the project aims to achieve. And the first step of this, we would look at the cost-benefit analysis that had been conducted for a project. And this would be passed over to our insurance guys, and they would create a ratio of the reduction to the benefit, and that would form the base of our score. They would also have a look at this analysis provided to us, the cost-benefit analysis, and using their experience of this kind of work beforehand, they would make any adjustments required depending on the robustness of that analysis. So if it was viewed to be kind of exaggerating the benefit, they might adjust it down, and vice versa. If it was deemed to not be capturing the potential benefit achieved, they might adjust it upwards as well. And then there's also a benefit and a potential adjustment for developing countries. So this would be used, say, if the ratio looks low, the resilience benefit ratio looks low because the value of the underlying assets in a developing country where the value is quite low. So it might distort and appear lower than it should be just because the value of the underlying assets is low compared to some like very valuable, I don't know, London property or something. So it would come out as a lower ratio, and only because that analysis might not be capturing the social benefit achieved in the developing country project. And for that reason, we've added another kind of step to this, where if we deem something like that, the social aspect, especially in a developing country, not to be captured, we will adjust the ratio up. So in a way, we can capture this. However, it is worth saying that if the cost-benefit analysis initially does try to capture these social benefits, then we will incorporate that into the analysis throughout. So that's how that works. Okay, and this is any further information on the product or any of our publications. You can go to spratings.com/green evaluation. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica.